So as an introduction, we all know that in the creation of Adam Rishon, there's mention of two types of trees, the Eitz Chaim and the Eitz Das. And this Gemara is going to introduce a third tree to us. And in fact, the Rebbe in his first Fabrengen told us about this third tree called Atze Shitim, called Shtus Dusha. And this tree actually is a tree that the terminology of the Gemara is going to be very interesting to read about. So we'll start the Mishnah. Mitzvah Sarava Ketzad. How is the mitzvah? Could you hear me okay? Okay. How's the mitzvah of Arava done in the Beis HaMikdash? Makam haya lamatim Yerushalayim v'nikra moitza. There was a place below Yerushalayim. I believe it's still there. I believe it's still called Moitza. It's below the road. And there's a well over there. It's very lush. And they would go over there, Yodin Lisham, Melaktim Misham Murviyah Shel Arava. They would collect from it the bunches and branches of Aravas. And the Koyanim would go over there on the day that they needed to do the Aravas, and they would put it on the side of the Mizbeach. So they were so tall, these Aravas, that it would form a layer of their tips that was covering the top of the Mizbeach. And once they did that, it's taku v'iri v'taku. And we'll see in the Gemara when this was done. If this was done, did they walk around with Aravos? Did they walk around with Lovim? Did they walk around with palm branches? So there's different opinions. We'll see that in the Gemara. Every day they would go around the Mizbech one time. And they would say, Ana Hashem Eshena, Ana Hashem Atzlichana. Rabbi Yehuda would say that he agrees that they would go around the Mizbech one time. However, he said they would say something else. Ani v'hoi Peshiana. And right away in the footnotes here in the art scroll, it talks about the word Ani v'hoi is actually the same words of Ana Hashem in Gematria. So it's actually the same word. And Ani v'hu is quite, he says it comes from the famous name of Hashem of 72 letters from the pasuk before Bnei Yisrael were going out of Mitzrayim, before the splitting of the Red Sea. And there's a famous pasuk, Vayasa, Vayavoy, Vayet, and that is the formation of this Ani v'hu, and that's what they said. And that day, which day is that day? That day is Hoshana Rabbah. They would circle the Mizbech 7 times. The footnotes speaks about circling the Yerichoi 7 times in order to bring the walls down. So basically, if any kitrug, if there was any prosecution against Bnei Yisrael, going around the bima, or around the mizbech in this case, 7 times was to eliminate any prosecution.
The Chaim, the
Yeah.
Tosfos on the side there just adds that when it says Ani v'hoi, Tosfos says that Ani v'hoi, right at the end of it, it says it's a reference to Hashem actually, that in talking about the time of Bavel, that as if Hashem was Azuk Basirim, and that as if Hashem himself was in Goyla. So the Ani v'hu, meaning him and myself, are in Goyla to redeem himself as well. That's the last you could see Yoshia Le'atzmai. Very beautiful in Tosfos at the end over there.
Beautiful. And no, definitely the word Ani v'hu, this Gemara opens up. It opens up a whole another meaning to the davening of Ani v'hu. And going around saying these words and going around the mizbeach, and in our case the bima, so was the purpose to bring down Yerichai, but also there were 2 other places that come to mind. I'm sure other people have other ideas. When Hashem created Adam Arisha, and it says that he said the Ana B'koyach 7 times, and he surrounded him, walked around him 7 times in order to make him into an Adam from the earth. And we know that also on a wedding under the chuppah, so the kala goes around 7 times. I'm sure there's a lot more significance. I'm sure you guys have ideas as well. So after finishing that, Bishas Pirasa Mahem Oimrim, at the time when they leave the Mizbeach, the Kohanim say, Yoifilucha Mizbeach, Leifilucha Mizbeach. They would say, Mizbeach, how beautiful you are, Mizbeach, how beautiful you are. Reb Lezer says, they would say, Leka, Lecha, Mizbeach, Leka, Ulecha Mizbeach. Hashem and to you, to the Mizbeach, and Hashem and to you, the Mizbeach. So it was a bit of a different lashon. The Gemara is going to expand on that, how that lashon worked. Just as they did it during the week, they also did it on Shabbos. So there was no issues doing it on Shabbos. However, there was one difference, one exception. Ella shahayu melakti naisa me'erev. So on a regular day of the week, they would cut the arovas very fresh the same day, I guess early in the morning. But on Shabbos, they actually would cut on Friday. And manichi naisam begigish ozav, and they would rest these arovas in buckets of gold, barrels of gold, so they would not wilt and die overnight, so they would stay fresh. Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka Eimer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka has a completely different opinion, very different. He says it wasn't a rovas. He says, they would bring palm branches. And they would take the branches and they would bang it on the floor on the side of the Mizbeach. And that day it was called the beating of the branches. And once that is over, so whether it was the palm or the arovas, miyad tinoika shempius luveim. And here we have 2 explanations, and there's different explanations. So miyad means either you could say that it means from the hands of the children, we would take their lulovim, and we would eat their esrogs, or Miyad means right away, quickly. Tinoika Shentis Lulavim, the children would right away jump and take the lulavim, and they would eat the esrog. So it's two explanations what this means right here. Okay. So now we go to the Gemara. Tana, we learned in the Brisa Makoim, Kolonia Have. This place where they went to pick up the Aravis was a place called Colonia, and the translation of Colonia is a duty-free, a tax-free place. So the Gemara says, "V'tani didan, my time of Karlin Maitza." Why did the Tana of the Mishnah call it Maitza if it was a place of tax-free, duty-free? So the Gemara answers, "Aida the Mepak, the Karga, the Malka, Karlin Maitza." Since this place was exempt from the king's tax, they called it Maitza. Maitza Lashon Yitzia. So it was Yoitze Mitachas Yidei Melech. It went away, it went out of the tax supervision of the king, and therefore it was called Maitza. So that's where they went to get the Arabas. It continues, and they would take, the Kohanim would take them, and they would strain them out on the side of the Mizbeach. Hana learned in the Brisa, Rabbis Varukos. The Arabas were many, and they were quite long. And then the Brisa tells us, Ugvois Achadasar Ama. The height of the Arabas, they would cut it so it was 11 amas high. So why were they 11? Because the Mizbech is 10 amas, and they wanted it to overlap the Mizbech, one amma, almost like a chuppah, but at least one amma surrounding the Mizbech, there would be a covering of the Aravis. So now the Gemara is going to try to understand that. Amar Mari, Mamisha Marzutra, Mari says in the name Marzutra, Shmami now, they said Manachu. It must mean that we learned from the Brisa that they didn't put it on the ground, they put it on the Yisoid of the Mizbeach. Why? So he goes and explains. If you think that they would put the Aravis on the earth, Manachlahu, they would rest it. Let's see, Michte. Allah Amma, Kanas Amma. The Mishnah says that the Yisoid was one Amma thick and it was one Amma deep. Zero Yisoid. So this whole explanation is going to tell us that it's not only the height, but it's also the depth. Allah Chamesh, it went up Chamesh the Mizbeach, the Chanas Amma, and it went a depth of an Amma. That's called Zehu Soivev. Allah Shalosh, it went up 3. Zehu Mekom Akronis. So it says, if you have these 2 extra amas of depth, if there were exactly 10, 11 amas, then they're going to lose on the angle 1 amma. So it's not going to have the full amma. The 11 amma is not enough. It should be 12 ammas. But from here we realize that in order not to lose on the angle that almost the whole amma, because of the depth of the Yisoid and the Soiviv, therefore we have to explain that we put it in the base. The Gemara says, Taka Shmamina. We do learn from it.
Yes.
Amar Rababo, Mikra. So where do we learn? Where do we know that we need to put these araves on the mizbeach? So Rav Avu asked the question, where's this law come from? Where's the idea to bring a Ravos and a Mizbeach come from? Shenemar, like it says, Isur Chag Bavosim et Kanus Mizbeach. So Isru Chag, in here, in this case, the Rav Avu translates the word Isru Chag. Isru is the lashon of going around. So you circle the Mizbeach on a Chag. So Isru means going on a Chag. Bavosim is talking about the Aravos, their branches. At Kanus Mizbeach, so we see from here that the Aravos need to reach the corners of the Mizbeach. In order to reach the corner of the Mizbeach, the corners of Mizbeach are 1 amma above the roof of the Mizbeach, and therefore it has to be 11 ammas. So that's where he brings the proof that it has to be on the Mizbeach, has to be instead of 10, 11. And Rabbi Vo also has another explanation on this pasuk. Amar Rabbi Vo, Amar Rabbi Lezer, Kol ha'noitev lulav beigudei. If someone takes a lulav and he wraps it in its own type, which means he makes the effort to wrap it with maybe another piece of the lulav, a hadas v'avoisa, and he finds a hadas that has 3 leaves in each level of its a branch of its leaves, so it's thick and it looks beautiful. So someone who pays attention to the beauty of the lulav and works very hard to make sure that his lulav and his hadassim are beautiful. Pasuk says that it's like he built a mizbeach and he brought a korban. Obviously, the korban is accepted. Shenemar, Isur Chag, Vavosim Ekar Mizbeach. So he gives him the second explanation. He says, you bind on the day of the yontiv of the festival, you bind the lulav. Vavosim, he says, Isru is binding the lulav. Chag is in the yontiv. Vavosim is the thickness, the ovi of the hadassim, which means that there's 3 leaves on each level of the leaves. There are 3 together, so it looks very nice and lush and beautiful. And somebody who does that, it's considered akarnas hamizbeach. It's considered like he brought a sacrifice to the horns, to the corners of the mizbeach, and he brought the blood. So it's just like he brought a korban. Unbelievable. Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Yomi Amishum Rav Shimon Chai. Rabbi Yomi says in the name of Rav Shimon Chai, Rabbi Yechana Mishum Rav Shimon Amar Chayzi Mishum Rabbi Yechana Amar Kusi. Says in the name. Rabbi Yechana says in the name of Rav Shimon Amar Kusi, Rabbi Yechana Amar Kusi. Kol ha'ise isu lachag achilu v'shtia. So here he uses a third translation of the word isru, or at least the foundation. He says someone who joins, he uses the word isur milashon of joining, and he focuses and joins the festival, the yontiv, with a lot of eating and drinking. So that's also a very big mitzvah. So male olav akosu kilu bana mizbeach v'ikir olav korban shenemar isur chag v'avosim kanes mizbeach. So his translation comes out that Isru Chag means that he adds to the yontiv. Avoisi means to be fat, ove. So if he eats a fat meat and he eats a lot of food, his meal is very fat. So Isru Chag, when he joins the yontiv avoisi with a lot of food, a lot of thickness of food, so it's considered it's considered like a korban, like he built the mizbeach, and he brought a korban on it. So making a beautiful lulav and wrapping it with its own kind and bringing hadassim that are three is the same thing. And also, if you eat and drink a very thick meal on Yom Tov, it's like you built the mizbech and brought a korban. Obviously, these are for, I would assume, for the days of the Golos, where we have no mizbech. Amar Chizki Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Shem Shem Vayachai. Kol mitzvahs kulan, all the mitzvahs, ain't other mitzvah b'hem el derech gedilasom. Why is it saying over here? Because it's talking about you have a lulav. Could you be yaitza a lulav if the lulav is held upside down or the estrog is held upside down? This is no, you can't. The only way you could be yaitza in a mitzvah, if you're using something that grows, it has to be in the same shape of its growth. And where's the proof? The proof is from the Mishkan. It says in the Mishkan that they built the walls of the Mishkan from cedar wood. They were called Atse Shitim Oimdim. There were trees of cedar that were standing. And what does that mean that they were standing? They stood in the same way that they grew. So the bottom was facing facing the root, and they would pay attention. Today, you get a piece of wood, you don't know which is the top, which is the bottom. But when they did the wood of the Mishkan, they made sure that the bottom would be the same bottom that faces the roots. Tanya Namahachi, also in the Braisa, the cedar tree standing in the Mishkan, that they were standing in the Mishkan in the same way that they were standing, the same way that they were growing. Another interpretation that the Brisa brings. They stand in a way that they could support the gold plating of these pieces of wood that were plated with gold. So they were standing in a way where the gold won't slip off and go away. Based on the next interpretation, this could also mean in the Gemara Chagiga. There's the end of Gemara Chagiga. It talks about how do we know that Talmidei Chachamim, they're protected, and it says Halo Kod Dvar Ka'esh Neum Hashem. So you learn it from the Mizbeach, that the Mizbeach is made out of wood, and it's just a very thin layer of gold that protects it from all the fires of the world. So the learning of Torah for Talmidei Chachamim protects them from the fire of Gehenna, and they are completely absolved from it because the words of Torah are like the tzipui of the Mizbeach. So here we see that these pieces of wood, these cedar woods, are protected, and they're standing in a way that the gold plating could continue. Another explanation. Oindim, they're standing. Maybe you're going to say, how could the Torah say that they're standing? Maybe you're going to say they're lost, and the chances of them being standing is gone. Why? Because the Mishkan is no longer. So how could you say they're already gone? Maybe they're never going to return. The Torah says different. It says that these cedar woods of the Mishkan, they stand in such a strong language They stand forever and ever and ever. La'olam, la'ome elamim, which means complete eternity, three times. Chazaka. And obviously, when you use the word Ateshitim, the Rebbe explains to us that the way to bring Mashiach and the only condition that the Rebbe accepted as Nasi is for us to use Shtus Dusha, which means you have a thinking of Eitz Hadas, which could be good and bad. You have Eitz Chaim, which could only be good. And you have another tree, it's called Ateshitim, that in that tree you have to act in a certain folly, a certain stupidity. It's called Shtus Dusha, where you do it above your mind, even without any thoughts. And when you do that, the Gemara is telling you that it stands forever and ever. That's what's going to bring us Mashiach. That's what the Rebbe said in the first Farbrengen of Yud Shvat, that he's going to become Rebbe on condition that we use the Shtus Dusha. Amar Chizkiya, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mishum Rishim B'Yochai, Cholani Liftar Eskal Ha'olam Kula Min Adin. So Rishim B'Yochai said, I could exempt the whole world from judgment from the day I was born until now. Now, I don't know if he actually did it or not. What does it mean? I can't. If anybody has any explanation, please let us know. The Sherichai says I could make the whole world exempt from the din because he was so righteous and his Torah and his mitzvahs were so pure that he could everybody else, the whole world is the worth of creation of the world and the time that he was in existence would eliminate all judgment from the entire world. Vilmele Elazar B'ni'imi. And if my son Elazar would agree to join me in this mission, I would be able to exempt the entire world. I would exempt the entire world from the day it was created until now, and there would be no judgment because the light of the Torah and the mitzvahs of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his son is so bright and so powerful that the whole entire world would be exempted from any judgment, and there would just be chesed. There would be no judgment. And he continues, Yosam ben Uziyahu imanu, and if Yosam, son of Uziyahu, who was a king of Yehuda, he would join us, I could accomplish a third level. I would be able to eliminate the judgment from the day the world was created until the end of times, till the end of the day of the world. So again, I don't know if he actually did it or not, and how he's bringing this to us. Now, a note of Yosem ben Uziel. Yosem ben Uziel was a king. His father, it says his father was a Metzora. Uziel was a Metzora, and he had to leave the palace. And his son was king, Yosem. But his son was so humble that anytime a decree was set out, or anytime he said a certain law, he always said it in the name of his father. He always respected his father, and he was very humble because in all actuality, in all reality, Yosem was the king, and he gave the honor to his father. He never wanted to take the kingdom in an official capacity until his father passed away. So we see these three tzaddikim who could have exempted the world from any type of judgment. Amar Chizkiya, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mishum Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, Reisi Bnei Aliyah, V'hei Molatim. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, I saw people of very high level, and I see that they're very little. Reisi Bnei Aliyah, V'hei Molatim. I see these people who Aliyah means, the little translation means going up, but I see there very few. Im elef hein, ani uvnai mehin. If there's 1,000, me and my son are with him. Im mea hein, if there's 100, ani uvni mehin, then myself and my son is one of those 100. Im shnayim hein, if there's only two, ani uvni hein, it's me, myself, and my son. So obviously, the work of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son in the cave in the 13 years brought him to such a level that was so exalted that there's no doubt that they are from the Bnei Aliyah. So the Gemara asks, "Umi zutriku lahai." How could you say that there's so little Bnei Aliyah? Amar Rava says, "Tamne srei alfei dara have dekamei kuchabrichu." Rava says that there are 18,000 rows. He translates dara as rows that are standing before the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So obviously, each row has also many people in the row. So how could you say 1,000 or 100 or two? Shenema Savish Manasar surrounding Hashem, there's 18,000. So it has to be much more than 1,000. Why does Reb Shimon Bar Yochai start with 1,000? So the answer is Loi Kasha. It's not a question. Why? Adam Istakle Bas Maklaria Meira. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he viewed Hashem in a way that was clear, with an lighted glass. The 18,000 that are there, they will actually not see Hashem with a clear binoculars glass. They would see it actually with a mirror. The Lomi Staka Saklari Meira, they would not see it with that. Their glass was actually a mirror. So they would look in the mirror and they would see behind them. And it says all the Nevi'im would see through a mirror, except Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu saw, and that's Paklaria Meir, he would see it in the direct view, direct light. So the Gemara asks, and those who see Hashem through the clear glass is so little that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says him and his son. Amar Abaye, lo pachasama mitlatim v'shita tzadikim, tzadikei, the mekabla v'shchina b'chol yom. Abaye says there has to be in existence in this world 36 tzadikim that receive the ape v'shchina, the continents of Hashem, b'chol yom. Shenemar ashrei kol choicheloi. It says ashrei, lucky, praiseworthy, are the ones who wait for him. Choicheloi, waiting, loi, for him. And the Gemara says, loi begimatria tlatim v'shisin havo. So it has to mean that at least there's 36 tzaddikim in every generation that are receiving and waiting for Hashem's light and Hashem's blessings, and they receive it. So if you take 36 times so many generations, so obviously the number is very high. So the Gemara answers, it says, Loi kasha. It's no difficulty. Ha de aile bevar, ha de aile beloivar. So the first translation of this answer is, there are those who enter Hashem's chamber by their own choice, and there are those who enter the chamber without any choices. That means that they could come and go into the king's chamber without asking permission. Says Moshe Rabbeinu would be able to speak to Hashem at any time he wanted. He didn't have to make an appointment. All the other Nevi'im had to have a preparation, and Hashem, and it would be a whole system how to get their Nevi'us. The the art scroll here says that there's another explanation of the word bevar, because bevar means like a son. Bar Yochai means the son of Yochai. So here he says, in the case of Rishim Bar Yochai, it was him and his son together. Therefore, that was a much greater level than just being a tzaddik by yourself. And being a tzaddik with your son was very, very rare. And that's what he meant with Bnei Aliyah. Okay. Continues in the Mishnah B'Shastri, when they finish the circling of the Mizbeach with Aravas, what do they say? So we said Ana Hashem Oshiana, or they would say that Mizbeach, how beautiful you are, or they would say what Rabbi says. What does Rabbi say? Rabbi says that they would say, I'm sorry, Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer would say, so the Tanakama says what they would say, Yaflu Chamizbeach, Yaflu Chamizbeach. How beautiful to you, Mizbeach, twice. Rabbi Lezer would say, Leka or Lecha Mizbeach, to Hashem and to you, Mizbeach, Leka or Lecha Mizbeach. So they would have a different lashon. So the Gemara says, V'haka mishtatav shem shamayim v'davar acher. Why is he using the same name of Hashem, Leka, Ulecha, Lemizbeach? It doesn't seem respectful. Someone who joins and pairs the name of Hashem with something else in the same sentence he becomes uprooted, because in the Gemara says in the Torah says Zovech le'elokim yacham bilti l'Hashem levadei. Bilti l'Hashem levadei means only to Hashem. Whenever you mention Hashem, Hashem has to be by himself. So why over here they have such a language that Rabbi Lezer is saying? He answers, Achi Kamar, Leka anachnu moedim. To Hashem we give thanks and we admit. Ulecha anu mishachrim. And to you, Hashem, we give praise. And to you, Hashem, we give thanks, and to you, Hashem, we give praise. So the focus was always on Hashem. What the Rebbe Lezer says in the Mishnah, the language of the Mishnah, is an abbreviation of what they said. But they always said Leka. So there's no issue in that statement. Kamasei b'chol, kach masei b'Shabbos, the Mishnah states that just as they did the Aravas in the Chol, they also did it on Shabbos. Amar Rav Huna, my time of the Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, what's the reason? Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika is, he says something else. He says, we don't use Aravas. We use palm leaves, which they ask, where does he get this idea that we don't use Aravas? We use palm trees. This dichtiv kapos. It says kapos is plural, so it means a minimum of plural is two. Shnaim achas lulov, achas hamizbeach. So you take one palm branch for the lulav and one palm branch for the mizbeach. So what did the Rabbanan say with the word kapos? Rabbanan amrei kapos, see, it says kapos, and we read it as a plural, but the way it's spelled singular. So therefore, it comes to teach us that it's only the lulav and nothing else. Reb Levi explains why do they bring the palm branches according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika? So besides maybe that he has the pasuk, he gives another explanation. He says, "Matamar ze ein lo elo lev echad," just like a palm tree doesn't have one. It has only one heart. which a different tree could have all types of branches going. You don't really see where the heart is. But a palm tree, you right away you see the lulav in the middle is always very recognizable where the heart of the tree is. Af Yisrael en lahem el lev echad lavin shel shamayim. So Bnei Yisrael, they only have one heart, and that heart belongs to their Father in heaven. So it's bringing a limud schus on Bnei Yisrael, so they would bring the palm branches to the Mizbeach to demonstrate that their heart is completely dedicated to Hashem. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Lulav Shiva. You say the blessing on the Lulav, you say seven days. The Sukkah, and the blessing on the Sukkah, you say only one day. My time, what's the reason that you say the Lulav 7 days and the Sukkah one day? So he says, Lulav the mafsake lelus miyomim koyom mitzvah pei nafshel. Lulav, the mitzvah of Lulav only applies during the day. It doesn't apply at night. And because we have the night separating the mitzvah, so it's not one big timing of the mitzvah. Therefore, every day you have to say a new bracha because at night you're not chayiv in the mitzvah. Sukkah. However, in Sukkah, the mitzvah of Sukkah does not stop at night. So therefore, Kula Shiva, all the 7 days of the Sukkah are considered like one day, like one long day, because they all fall under one category of a mitzvah, and there's no separation between them. However, Rava Bar Chana says in Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Sukkah Shiva, the Sukkah, the bracha of the Sukkah is said 7, the opposite of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. V'lulav yom echad. And lulav is only said on one day. My timer. What's the reason? Sukkah deraisa shiva. A sukkah, the mitzvah of sukkah, sitting in a sukkah in all 7 days comes from deraisa. Lulav, we learned before that the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted to shake the lulav all 7 days. But really, you have to shake it only one day. Therefore, only one day you say the bracha. So you only say a bracha when it's the eraisa. When it's not the eraisa, you don't say a bracha. Very good. Also, Ravin, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, when Ravin came back to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, he brought the Shmaita, he brought the saying in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh Shiva. The mitzvah of Sukkah and the mitzvah of Lulav, both of them you say the bracha on them all 7 days of the Yom. Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Nekoit the Rabba Bar Chana b'yadech. Pay attention and take the opinion of Rabba Bar Chana very strongly, which means you should try to follow it. The halacha should be like that. The Kula Amorai Kaime Kavasei B'Sukkah. And all the Amoraim who mention Rabbi Yechanan, they agree that in the Sukkah you say it 7 days, all 7 days, not one day. They challenged it. When somebody prepares his lulav before the Yom Tov, he says Baruch Shechianu v'Kimanu v'Genu Zman. He says the bracha of Shechianu. Not loylatzos, but on the Yom Tov when he takes it to be yetz to the mitzvah. Oimer Baruch Asher Kichanu v'Tzoyis Tzimanu Telos Lulav. V'afa pi shemer chalav yom Rishon Chazon Baruch Kol Shiva. So what does it say over here? That you say the bracha all 7 days. on the lulav. The Brisa continues, "Ha'isa sukkah atzmai." When you prepare the sukkah, you say Baruch Shechianu Kimanu. Nichnas leishaba, when he comes in to sit and fulfill the mitzvah. Oimer asher kirishana mitzvah tzivana leishaba sukkah. And since he blessed the first day, he doesn't have to bless the rest of the days. So that's kasha lulav lulav, kasha sukkah sukkah. So this is going to be a question on Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the sukkah shiva lulav yamechad says exactly the opposite. So he says like this. B'yishleim lulav lulav kasha. Why? In the case of lulav, it's not a question why. Because in the mikdash, they did have to take the lulav all 7 days. So therefore, you said a bracha all 7 days in the lulav. However, when the Beis Hamikdash is not here, and the mitzvah of lulav is only midarabanan, why do you have to say a bracha? It says elasuka sukkah, so that's the answer for that. But elasuka sukkah kasha, here we clearly say that you have to say the bracha 7 days. So the Gemara says no, Tanai, it's a machlekes of Tanaim, and he goes into another area. The Tanya tefillin calls mevarach aleim. Whenever you put on tefillin, you say the bracha. Dir Rebbe. Chacham say ina mevarach el shachis bevad. You only say the bracha once in the morning, and then you can take it on and off the entire day. You don't have to say a bracha again. So what do we see? The Rebbe says even though in one day you could say the bracha many times. The same thing like sukkah. Even though we said that the sukkah is considered Yomi Arichta, because the night is also responsible for the mitzvah sukkah, so there's no separation. Still in all, even though we consider the all 7 days one long day, you could say the bracha many times during one day. As Rebbe says, you could say the bracha many times to putting on tefillin. Well, so what time did we learn, or how does that work? We learn one page, or we learn a page and a half? Page and a half? Okay, keep on going. What? Right now I did what? Oh, okay. Hey.
Until
Okay, so we'll
7,
continue a little further.
around 7 o'clock.
Okay, 7 o'clock, 8 minutes. Itmar, we learn Abai Amar Hilchas Karabi. Verav Amar Hilchas Karabana. So they both argued who the halacha is if you say it. Amar Mari Berei the Bashmuel, of Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel. So he was a grandson of Shmuel. Hazinia Rava the Lavit Kishmate. He said that Rava himself did not follow according to Rabban and say that you only say one bracha. Why? In the morning he would wake up early and go to the restroom. He would then come out and wash his hands. He would put on tefillin and say the blessing. But if he needed to use the bathroom, the restroom again, he would go to the restroom. He would come out and wash his hands. And he would go ahead and put on tefillin and say the bracha. So even though he said the halacha is like the Rabbana, and he himself would follow Rebbe and say the bracha again. So now we see that both Abaye and Rava used the opinion of Rebbe, and therefore we're also going to say that the halacha is like Rebbe, and we're going to say the bracha all 7 days. Oh, Marzutra Hazine Leila Rav Papi, they call aim as the manach tefillin mevarach. we saw Rav Papi that any time that he would put his tefillin, even if it was many times in the same day, he would go ahead and say the bracha. Rabbanan, the Ravashi, the rabbis in the Beis Medrash for Ravashi, anytime they would touch the tefillin, they would also give it a new blessing. That's like another whole opinion, another whole level. So basically, according to the Rabbanan Ravashi, they would touch the tefillin in order to have their machshava connected to it. Anytime they felt maybe they went off the thought of tefillin or the connection of tefillin, they would touch it and say the bracha. Okay, we'll stop over here. By Amar Vila Mishwal. Shkoya, Shkoya. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day. Shkach.
Great day to everybody.